of kings, better than diamond rings. Football, Wildcats, football, Wildcats, football, Wildcats, football, Wildcats, football, Wildcats, football, Wildcats.
Welcome to the Married with Picks podcast, season 5, episode 16, week 16. All right, Steve, so we're recording this a little bit early, so it's Friday afternoon. The one thing I do not have the benefit of is every Friday around 5 o'clock, I review the NFL's injury report. So we're a little premature on some of the injury front. I also wanted to mention that there is cold weather on the East Coast. So that will affect any game that is being played on the East Coast. No snow or rain or wind or anything significant like that, just cold weather.
Just low temperatures?
Yes, which may or may not.
What about wind?
No wind. May or may not affect certain quarterbacks, which maybe we'll get to. One other thing I did want to mention, I've done this in the past, I haven't mentioned it the last few weeks, but last week I had a significant change in my feel for the Eagles-Steelers game. I had the epiphany on Saturday afternoon. I did post it in the comments on the YouTube video. So make sure you check those because we are recording this early. There could be some changes. All right. So we have no teams on bye. So we have
and
a lot
the change resulted in a win?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it dawned on me that the line on that.
You like the Eagles.
The Eagles game was just wrong. No bye weeks. There are 2 games being played on Saturday this week, which are the first 2 games we're going to talk about. Woo! That was a lot. I'm out of breath.
Don't forget to like
and subscribe. Now, the first game on the card is the Texans at the Chiefs. This line has kind of been all over the place. I believe it is currently at -3.5 in favor of the Chiefs. So Mahomes left the game last week with an ankle injury. I think apparently this got blown way out of proportion because he came out of that game at a point where they were winning significantly, which is rare for them. So I don't know that this injury is any more significant than his ankle has been in the past. So I'm going to take the same approach that I've generally taken with the Chiefs over the last few weeks, with the exception of last week. It is most likely that the Chiefs will win this game, but I would not trust them to cover, especially with the hook in there. The Texans do have a good pass rush, and the Chiefs are struggling with their offensive line this year. One other thing to mention, there's this one podcast I listen to, and they talk about like the referees in every game. And obviously the Chiefs, a lot of people would argue that they get the benefit of a lot of calls.
Yes, they do.
Apparently, this guy, Carl Sheffers, who was officiating this game, I didn't get all the details, but he had some issues with the Chiefs in the past where he made calls against them that they didn't agree with. And Travis Kelce said that he shouldn't be allowed to wear a referee uniform even at the Foot Locker. So this may be a game where the Chiefs don't get the benefit of the calls. What's your pick?
I'm going Chiefs just because I've been a fan of the Texans all year, but they just don't seem like they have what it takes to beat the best teams in the league. And even though the Chiefs have won a lot of games here, but close, but like 2-3 points, I just don't like the Texans here. They're coming off the bye, right?
No buys last week.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Well, the main thing is
they're coming off a win over the Dolphins.
Yeah, the Dolphins. Okay. So another team that doesn't beat good teams. So I like the Chiefs here mainly because it appears that Hollywood Brown is back, and they have been missing a number 1 target receiver the entire season, right? Xavier Worthy hasn't been it. He's the draft pick, the high-rated, like end of first round draft pick that they got. He's had some flashes in 1 or 2 games, but hasn't really put up big numbers. Really surprised that DeAndre Hopkins hasn't stepped up and been more formidable. And
but don't you think,
consistent.
he's drawing the coverage in these games.
He is. So I think, at least in this first game, he should continue to draw the coverage. And Hollywood Brown can kind of get back on the scene and hopefully surprise everybody.
Do we know for sure that he's playing?
It's not 100% from what I'm reading, but everything that I see is usually what is indicative of a player that's about to play. He's coming off the injury, and they didn't expect him to be ready this week, but Andy Reid's really talking and it's almost like he doesn't want to get jinxed to say he's going to play, but he felt great after 2 days of practice. So he's back. Patrick Mahomes is healthy. He's not, I don't believe he has an injury designation coming into the game. It is a Saturday game, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to stay with the Chiefs here, even though they're getting 3 in a hook. I think probably by kickoff it might be 3.
Okay. All right. Opposite sides of that one. I don't see any reason to treat that any different than we treat any Chiefs games, with the exception of last week where they played Jameis Winston. All right, next game is the Steelers at the Ravens. This is at Ravens -6.5. This is a division game. I think there are quite a few division games this week. The
rest of the season is going to be a lot of division games. Usually the league is now stacking up the last 3 weeks with division matchups.
Yeah. So these teams played back in week 11. The Steelers won that matchup 18-16. At that time, I talked about how the Steelers have dominated the matchup back to 2020. The Ravens only have 1 win. Interestingly enough, Lamar Jackson has not actually played in a lot of the matchups versus the Steelers. So I think he's faced them now 5 times altogether, and he only has 1 win in those matchups. So it's the Steelers, the way that they defend him, Lamar seems to struggle with that. Now, the Steelers do have some injuries in this one. George Pickens already ruled out again. TJ Watt was on the injury report. There was some question as to whether he was going to play. It sounds like he will. And their defensive tackle, Larry Ogunjobi, was a limited participant at practice yesterday. Now, the last matchup, that was won basically off field goals, at least on the Steelers side. And I think Tucker missed a couple in that one too. So I could see a similar script. I would obviously like this a lot more if Pickens was playing, although in the last matchup, he only had 89 yards on 8 receptions. So it wasn't a monster game for him. I do think that the Ravens may pull out the victory here, but I am going to take the points on this one. And currently 60% of the money and bets is on Pittsburgh's side.
So I'm back and forth on this game a lot, but what I'm going to lock in on is what we talked a little bit about last week is teams playing the week after they play the Eagles have not fared well. So it scares me at 6.5. It seems like too many points, but just watching last week's game for Pittsburgh, without Pickens being in there, they really struggled to move the ball down the field through the air. And they had a little bit of a fumble problem with the running back. So I'm going to take the Ravens here begrudgingly, but mostly because I think the Steelers, they're not at 100%. Like you said, Watt's hurt. So you need that defense strong if you're going to chase around Lamar Jackson all day, because he's going to give them problems. I look for Derrick Henry here, but on a side note, I know Pittsburgh's run defense is usually stingy, but I'm looking for Derrick Henry to get off because he has had suboptimal performances over the last couple of weeks from a running yards perspective.
Yeah, they just didn't use him last week against the Giants. They decided to throw it a lot.
And I think this is the game where, hey, let's pull out all stops for the Ravens because they're a game back of the Steelers. They really need to win this game. They're going to be focused. And again, I think the Steelers are going to come in a little beat up after losing by 2 touchdowns basically to the Eagles last week. Take the Ravens.
With the points.
Take the Ravens and the points.
Okay. All right. So, I could totally see this being the game that bucks the trend. I do think the Ravens have a shot at winning this one, but I'm still going to take the points with the Steelers. It's a division game. These teams are going to defend each other.
I love Ravens money line.
We saw, like in the Eagles game last week. That was a defensive battle for the first half at least. All right.
So we're on opposite sides of that one.
Yes, technically. All right. Next game is the Browns at the Bengals. The line is Bengals -7.5. This is also a division game. These teams played back in week 7. Bengals won that game 21-14. Now, for all the hype over Jameis Winston, he wasn't eating many W's. So he is benched. It will be DTR Dorian Thompson-Robinson, which I know why they call him DTR now, will be starting this game. He started 3 games for the Browns last year. In those games, he threw 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions. His record was 1-2 as a starter. He did get a win versus the Steelers, 13-10. Joe Burrow's been airing it out. They have been winning the last few weeks. I don't trust DTR. I don't see any reason to go any other way. I don't love the hook. I guess you could see where this line goes. I don't know that it would go down. But I got the Bengals.
I just don't like the Bengals giving up 7.5 this year to anybody. You know, it just doesn't seem right. I don't care what the situation is.
Well, you said that last week. They played the Titans. It didn't work out so well.
Yeah. So I'm going to be on the Brown side here, but more importantly, I like the over. I think the points are going to come.
You think?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. I don't know that I see the Browns putting up a lot of points. But
DTR's got, second chance at it after struggling last year.
Yeah. It's kind of just like Jameis.
I don't love this game side matchup, though. I don't love it at all.
All right. Next game.
It's really 2 bad teams.
I'm sure you're going to love this one more than. Cardinals at the Panthers. The Cardinals
surprise you on this
are 4.5-point favorites here. So last week, the Cards dealt with the Patriots pretty handedly. I don't know. I almost feel like maybe the Cardinals are the new Dolphins. Like they can beat up on bad teams, can't compete with good ones. Maybe we've been giving the Panthers a little too much credit just because they were competitive for a few weeks. They came back down to earth. Taking them as a 2.5-point favorite last week was a mistake. So I am going back to the thought that the Panthers are just bad. So I will take the Cardinals. Now, this is one game. There's some talk like Jared Goff is the number 1 guy. Like, he can't play in cold weather. Tua gets that too. Kyler Murray, I guess. There was some talk about that. They asked him at a press conference what he thought about it being cold. And I think it's only supposed to be 35 degrees, which for us, on the East Coast, isn't exactly cold. But
he's a Texas guy.
Yeah.
He's used to the heat.
But I'm still going to take the Cardinals. So you could run on the Panthers. If the Cardinals can get the run game going, I think they can easily.
No, I think we're on completely different sides of the earth on feeling for the Panthers. So I agree that they were going hot into last week's game against Dallas. But if you remember, I had the Cowboys. Cowboys rolled on them pretty good. But I think that doesn't mean that the Panthers aren't playing well. They've shown that they've lost a lot of games, but they're playing these games tight in most cases.
They were.
And after one game, I'm flipping back against the Cards, having to come all the way over to the East Coast in the cold weather, like you said. I hope this line continues to go up, right? It opens at 1. It's now 4.5. Hopefully we get up to 5 or north of that. And regardless, at 4.5, anything above 3, I think the Panthers keep this tight to a 3-point game. It's going to be one of those shockers. Like the Cards should probably blow them out, but they're not going to.
All right. Different sides there. All right. So the next game is the Eagles at the Commanders. The Eagles are 3.5-point favorites. And before I go any further on this game, I just want to mention I threw the challenge flag on you last week about the Brandon Graham comments. And I did go back and listen to the tape on that. And you had said that he did not say it was personal. And during the course of what he said the word personal twice. Okay. So back to the game here. It is a division game. These teams played week 11. Eagles won that game 26-18. It was a weird game because Jaden Daniels.
And while we were talking about that Eagles game during that same conversation, what side did you take?
On the podcast. All right. So it was a weird game where he didn't throw the ball to a wide receiver until the second half of the game. I want to say it was the fourth quarter. Maybe it was the third. I kind of questioned at the time whether he was fully healthy. So I'm still going to chalk that game up to the fact that the ribs were still an issue. since then, no Austin Eckler in this game, and Zach Ertz, who's kind of been like his little go-to guy sometimes in the red zone specifically, is questionable. He suffered a concussion in the game last week. Now, the Eagles had their big win over the Steelers. Saquon did get banged up along with A.J. Brown. It sounds like they're going to play, but something to keep an eye on there. Now, the Commanders ended up in a very close game with the Saints last week somehow. The last time where they kind of didn't play very well came out the next week. They came out firing. And that was when they played the Cowboys and then they played the Titans. Obviously, the Eagles are not the Titans, but I'm going to expect them to come out firing in this one. So I am going to take the points with the Commanders here.
Well, look, I think, AJ, they said had a day off and then showed up with some kind of knee soreness, but he should be fine. And Saquon doesn't even have an injury designation, so they're going to be fine. I wouldn't worry about any of the injuries for the Eagles. I am concerned that the first time they played, Jaden Daniels was a little nicked up and he didn't look like he was himself. And they've been circling this game to get the Eagles back down into Washington since they lost the first time in Philadelphia. So I don't like the fact that the Eagles are 3.5-point favorites going on the road down to Washington in a division game. 3 max, 3.5. It's a little suspect.
I think you guys are due for a loss here too.
Yeah, they're
crazy.
And I don't know that there's not many losses left on the schedule. And this is probably the only chance. So I'm going to go. I'm not saying that they're going to lose, but I don't think they're going to cover. I'm going to take the Commanders.
All right. Same side of that one. All right. Next game is the Giants at the Falcons. And I don't know if this line has moved at all since I put this together, but the Falcons are on my card 8.5-point favorites. So Kirk Cousins has been benched. It will be Michael Penix starting for the Falcons. On the Giants side, they're going back to Drew Lock. DeVito was concussed last week. If he clears concussion protocol, he would be the backup. Otherwise, the backup is Tim Boyle. I can't take the Falcons as 8.5-point favorites with a rookie quarterback starting, but I absolutely refuse to take the Giants at any point for the rest of this year. So I have no play on this game, and I would advise you not to either.
Well, I can see why you're saying that, and I hesitate to say what I'm about to say, but I really like Penix. I think Penix was the best quarterback coming out of the draft, to be honest with you. He's just a little older, and he got in a bad situation being drafted by Atlanta where they just went and got Cousins as a free agent. So they had to go with Cousins, but Cousins probably should have been pulled 3 or 4 weeks ago. His arm strength doesn't look like it's there, and typically I'm gun shy on a rookie quarterback, especially in the first couple of games in the NFL. However, again, Penix is a little older than your normal quarterback coming out of the draft. He's got a little bit more maturity. And he rolled with Washington all last year, right? They damn near won a national championship.
College. Okay.
Penix, yeah. Washington Huskies.
I thought you meant the Commanders.
Not the Commanders.
Okay.
So I'm a big Penix guy. I'm really eagerly anticipating watching this game. But
it probably won't have to do much. They do have a good ground game with Bijan, but it's just a big line.
But let's not forget, there's still a shit ton of weapons there. With Robinson, with the running game, obviously. But you got Pitts that I know he hasn't been that great, but he's a top 10 pick, tight end, and arguably Cousins hasn't had a good season. Pitts has been playing with some really bad quarterbacks like Mariota, right? Riddick,
yeah, well, I guess that's what we thought, though.
Penix can get the ball to him.
Maybe.
They also have really good wide receivers. So I love Mooney. I'm in love with Mooney. So we'll see if Penix is set up to really, it's going to be nuts because if he can get some momentum and get some wins under his belt, Atlanta's in a position where they can make the playoffs. They actually could win the division over Tampa Bay. So, I'm going to run with Atlanta because of how high I am on Penix. I've been waiting for him to start. And the fact that the Giants just look like they're tanking.
No, they're definitely tanking.
So, I don't think that the 8.5 line looks a little scary, but I think they're trying to, attract the New York betting fan on to going on the Giants because everybody else is going to go Falcons.
All right. Next game is the Titans at the Colts. Colts are 3.5-point favorites. This is a division game as well. These teams played back in week 6. However, that was a Joe Flacco versus Will Levis game. Colts won that 20-17. In addition, the Colts have won both matchups last year, 31-28 in overtime and 23-16. Now this is going to be Anthony Richardson versus Mason Rudolph because Will Levis has been benched by the Titans. I think the Colts probably win, but I could certainly see it being a 3-point game. So I would take the points, but again, I just don't recommend betting this game.
Well, it looks like Tony Pollard's questionable, so Spears may be in line to get a lion's share of the carries there. They're banged up at wide receiver with Westbrook, Akine, and Tyler Boyd questionable. But hopefully all those guys go. I like Mason Rudolph in this Tennessee offense. I think that they've been challenged recently as to coach doesn't have them playing with a lot of heart. Yeah. And I think when you have your backup,
I wonder if they miss Grable.
I would.
I mean, he was definitely a better coach than this clown.
But I think you start to challenge people's manhood like that, and that's when they show up to play. This is a division game. The Colts aren't that great. 3.5, I like the hook. It's enough to attract me to take the Titans.
Okay. Nothing is enough to attract me to take the Titans. That's the problem. So I have no pick on that game.
I was on Colts last week, but, that's a division game. This is like a wonky feel to it. I like the Colts better. It's a little suspect that Mason's coming in to play, but I didn't like Levis. I think
what
much took
goes
the Titans with Levis.
like unstated is the Titans' offensive line is not good. And it's not making Will Levis look good. It doesn't make Mason Rudolph look good either, though. I mean, he's been better, but he's thrown his share of interceptions too. So, but anyway, next game is the Lions at the Bears. This line is Lions -6.5. This is also a division game. We can all remember that these teams played on Thanksgiving. That was the game that got Matt Eberflus fired. Lions won that game 23-20 at the end because the clock ran out. Now, the Lions dominated the first half of that game. The Bears came back in the second. Bears have not been competitive at all in the last 2 games since Eberflus was fired. They have 8 straight losses at this point. Now, their last 2 games since Eberflus was fired, since this game, were road games. And I do think that there is something to the fact that the Bears don't play well on the road. They are going to be back home in this one. This is an outdoor game in the cold for Jared Goff. We saw the Lions defense get beat up on by the Bills. They've been suffering from these defensive injuries all year. I think it has finally caught up to them. They have 16 defensive players on the IR at this point. They also lost David Montgomery last week. I don't think the Lions will lose 2 in a row. I definitely think they win this game. Whether they cover, I'm not 100% sure. I could see this being a game where maybe the Bears are more competitive than they have been back at home. I am going to take the Lions, but my best approach would probably be pick one of these other games and tease the Lions with somebody else. Because I feel very strongly that they win. I don't necessarily feel as strongly that they cover.
Well, I like the Bears. I don't love the Bears, but the Lions are just getting nicked up, and this is going to catch them. They're going to lose one of these games, I think, at the end of the year, one of these 3 that you don't expect them to, and pull even if the Eagles don't lose. So you got that 3-way race, right, for the number 1 seed between Minnesota, Detroit, and Philadelphia. It's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out because all 3 could run the table. But Bears getting 6.5 here at home. I think I'm going to take the Bears. I know I'm taking the Bears.
All right. I mean, I don't disagree with you there, but I'm going to stick with the Lions. All right. Next game is the Rams at the Jets. The Rams are 3-point favorites at this point. This is an interesting game to me. I can't say that I've gotten the Rams right a lot this year. Now, the Jets have been playing better. They finally got a win last week. That was versus the Jaguars, though. Devontae Adams actually didn't have a catch in the entire first half and then ended the game with like 198 yards and 2 touchdowns. They have been competitive in the last 3 games, but those games were versus the Colts, the Seahawks, and the Dolphins. I did want to go back and look at Rodgers versus McVay. So when Rodgers was with the Packers, he played McVay's Rams 3 times between 2021 and 2022. Rodgers and the Packers actually won all 3 of those matchups, which I thought was interesting because I thought McVay would have defended him better. So I was kind of surprised to see that. Now, the Rams have won 3 in a row, and they are on top of that division at 8-6. Seahawks are same record, but they are in second place currently. Now, last week, the Jaguars do play a lot of man coverage, which Rodgers generally has played well against, and they were covering Adams man-to-man, which obviously didn't work out too well in the second half for them. Now, the Rams play a lot more zone coverage, so I'm not going to get caught up in the Rodgers hype. And I forgot to go back and look this up, but I think there is some record that Rodgers is close to getting maybe like 500 touchdown passes or something. Does that sound right? But I think he needs 2 more touchdowns for whatever this is. Does he get it this week? I don't know. I'm not going to be fooled by Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I'm off the Aaron Rodgers train. I've gotten sucked in enough. And, this is a place where you start to challenge yourself when you want to walk away from the Jets and they're at home against the Rams and they're getting 3 points. It doesn't seem right, but I think Vegas is on to something here. The Rams are 8-6. They're tied with Seattle, so the pressure's on to keep winning so that they can get into the playoffs because most likely the second place team in that division probably won't make the playoffs. So they're playing for a division matchup. They both have Arizona nipping behind their heels by 1 game. They're 7-7. I just think it's a spot where even though they struggled like last week against the 49ers, it was a bunch of field goals, 12-6 battle, poor weather. I know it's going to be cold, but I think Puka Nacua is starting to show up and ball out. Puka starting to show up. And he's starting to ball out, and that's the reason why I like him. And how can you not like Williams? Williams has stayed healthy all season long and has been really a focal point of the Rams team.
What about Cooper Kupp?
Cooper Kupp is hit and miss. I'm seeing signs of him getting too old to play.
Yeah, he hasn't been as effective as he has been previously.
But there's been a couple games where he's looked like old Cooper Kupp getting 10, 11 catches for over 100 yards. He just can't maintain that performance throughout the whole season. So I look for his career to start tapering off after the season. Maybe he's got still a few good games. So I'm not totally anti-Kupp, but just know what you're getting into.
Out with the old, in with the new.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I like Stafford here coming back into New York, and I think he's going to get a win. So I would lay the points on the road, even though typically be pushing for this many points on the road, being the Jets really being home and being a home dog, to lean that way, but not this time. I'm going Rams.
All right. So next game is Vikings at Seahawks. Vikings are currently 3.5-point favorites. So we saw Geno Smith leave the game last week. Sam Howell came in for him. It sounds like Smith is back at practice and will play this week. It also sounds like they are going to get Kenneth Walker back for this one. DK Metcalf was not at practice on Wednesday, and their starting center, Olusegun Oluwatimi.
I'm proud of you even for trying.
I thought I was going to do a better job with it, or I wouldn't have. Was DMP on Thursday. I think that is definitely something to keep your eye on because we saw Geno Smith, and I don't know that, at least in my mind, the Packers had like a great pass rush. But Geno Smith was under fire last week against the Packers. So they obviously have offensive line issues. Vikings have a very good defense. So it could be more of the same for Geno Smith in this one. I'm never, not at all this year, have I been fooled by the Seahawks, and I'm not going to do it here. I am going to take the Vikings. I worry a little bit about Sam Darnold going on the road in Seattle. I believe there could be rain in this one, which obviously is not uncommon for Seattle. but I will take the Vikings here.
I'm on the other side. I like Seattle. I'm willing to be fooled again. So we're going to take another shot.
You were
at them.
last week.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Kenny Walker III's back. That guy is electric, right? So he gives them another dynamic that they didn't have that they're going to need to beat the Minnesota Vikings in their defense. Geno Smith is back, and it looks like he's not really carrying an injury designation. He's had full practice last 2 games, I believe. So we should be good there. Seattle's at home getting 3.5. I really honestly don't understand why the line's this big. It should be more of like a pick on maybe 1 point. I understand that, Minnesota's 12-2, but I really like Seattle in this game. Okay. I'm taking Seahawks all day at home.
All right. I really like the Vikings there.
This is a marquee matchup.
3.
Come on.
All right, fine. 3.5.
It's not 3 anywhere.
I know.
I respect it.
Try.
I respect it. Yeah, good job. Good try.
All right. Next game.
Make me proud.
Patriots at the Bills. Bills are 14.5-point favorites. This is obviously a division game. And when I first saw this in my mind, I thought these teams had played early in the season and the Bills won like 40-10 or something. And then when I looked it up, I realized that they actually have not faced each other yet this year. And that was actually the Jaguar game that I was thinking of, where the Bills just dominated them in the first half. So interestingly enough, last year when these teams played, the Patriots actually won one matchup 29-25, and then the Bills won the second 27-21. Now those games were obviously with Belichick at coach, so I don't know how much credit we can give it here, but it is a division game. This is a humongous line. Bills obviously put it all out there last week in their game against the Lions. So I can totally see this game going very much like the Jaguar game earlier in the season, where by the time the first quarter comes to an end, the game is over. I could certainly see the Bills winning it 40-10, but I can also see this being a lower scoring defensive maybe that's the wrong word to use when talking about the Patriots, but a division game between these two teams. So unfortunately, I have to take the Patriots at 14.5.
Well, I don't think that I can take the Patriots. I think the Bills are just like, the Bills seem to be on a path to the Super Bowl and seem to be more of like the Chiefs have been in recent years, where they're just steamrolling.
Yep. But anytime you say there's no way.
That's a shit ton of points. I see what you're saying. It's tough to give up that many points, especially in a division matchup.
I'm not saying I feel good about it, but that's where I got to go.
But let's just remember that the Bills have, and McDermott, the coach, have endured years of losses and division wins from the New England Patriots. So it's not as if they're going to have any love loss for the Patriots coming in struggling this season. They're going to try to stick it right up their ass if they can.
No, I think they have bigger fish to fry when it's all said and done.
Yeah, but this is part of it. This is what the fans are going to want to see. They're going to want to win by 30 points. Believe me. I know a lot of Buffalo fans, and they're going to want to stick it right up where the sun don't shine.
And regardless, I mean, I haven't
so
watched.
They're not going to take their foot off the
I haven't watched a lot of Patriots games, but there's been a lot of talk that like Drake May looks good. So even if they do that maybe at least he can get a backdoor cover.
Yeah. I see him more like, I like him too, and I think he's decent, and I need him to throw a couple passes to the tight end, Henry. But I still not letting that cloud my vision for the outlook of this game. I'm going to take the Bills. I think that they roll. I see like a 20 or greater point win.
Of the money right now is on Buffalo too.
All right. So there you go. Money's always right.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
All right. So next game is the 49ers at the Dolphins. This line, I believe, has actually gone down since I wrote this. I believe it's closer to a pick 'em at this point. Now, my gut was right on the Dolphins last week, and that's why when I kind of faltered, I was like, I'm not changing sides because my gut is always right. Now, while the 49ers do not have a winning record, I do consider them a good enough team to follow this approach. These teams actually played week 13 of the 2022 season. That was a Purdy versus Tua game, and the 49ers won that game 33-17. McDaniels obviously came from the 49ers and the Falcons, so he's tagging along with Sean I'm not Sean McVay. Kyle Shanahan. Last week, interestingly, the Texans played the Dolphins, and D'Amico Ryans was also from San Francisco. So I think even though the 49ers are not the same team that they were last year, they have not done me right, I don't think, a single game this year. I hope I'm not wrong, but I'm going to take this approach. I like the 49ers a lot in this game. Now, they obviously have all the running back injuries. Now it sounds like Isaac Guerrero may not play either. Who's the guy? Patrick Taylor? Is that the next man up?
Taylor's the next guy.
I don't know if it matters. They are going to be without Trent Williams on the offensive line again. And Nick Bosa, I believe he's questionable, but I think he played last week. He's going to play through this injury, it sounds like, for the most part. So I'm taking the 49ers. I hope they don't let me down again. They've let me down a lot this year.
I'm going to take the Dolphins. I'm on the other side for a lot of the reasons you just said. But with Trent Williams out of the game, they don't really run the ball well. He's questionable, so they still might play. But like you said, Guerrero is out. Patrick Taylor will start. Israel, I'm going to try to pronounce this one. Abanikanda is the backup. So he should get some looks. But you got Debo, Juan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall back from the shooting.
Yeah, I have a hard time with Juwan Jennings.
Juwan Jennings is in there. Juwan Jennings is a player. He scored some touchdown passes this year. So
he's been effective.
But they're going on the road to Miami. And I think the Dolphins are desperate for a win, and I think San Francisco is just cashed out.
Yeah, Kyle Shanahan, don't fail me this week. Come on, man. You're a good enough coach.
Last week was like the
good
dagger.
Enough coach to stick it to Mike McDaniels one more time.
They lose to the Rams, who they lost to earlier in the season, and they hadn't lost to them under the tenure, right?
I'm glad that game, we didn't have to talk about it.
So it's almost like the heart just got ripped out. Couldn't even score a touchdown against their division rival Rams, who they handled over the past but they did have that game against the Bears in between where they just absolutely dominate it. The Bears.
So they still have it in them, and they can do it here for sure.
All right.
Next game is the Jags at the Raiders. Raiders are 1.5-point favorites. So last week against the Jets, Mac Jones actually was competitive. I think he threw a couple touchdowns to Brian Thomas Jr. Last week, Desmond Ridder really didn't do anything for the Raiders. It sounds like Aiden O'Connell will be back as the starting quarterback this week. He has been serviceable this year. Jacoby Myers is on the injury report. That's kind of his go-to guy. So maybe keep an eye on that. I don't know if he's that important. In general, these teams, the Jags are 3 and whatever. Raiders are 2 and whatever. And interestingly enough, and this shocked the hell out of me, but 80% of the bets and the money is on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Are people insane? It doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't like this game.
People like Mac Jones.
And his name's Chris Long. He does a podcast every week.
He's an ex-Eagle. We know who Chris Long is.
That's what I was just going to ask.
Son.
Okay, yeah. So he mentioned that basically rumblings that the Raiders don't want to win because they're in line for the top pick of the draft. So something to consider. I think the Raiders are the better team here. But I wouldn't waste your money on this game.
Well, the Raiders are there, just to clear up, the Raiders are 2-12, right?
And the Jags are
3-11. Right. So the only other team with 2 losses is the Giants. And we talked about how we think the Giants are tanking. So the Raiders could be tanking here too. But.
And I think while the Jaguars could certainly use the draft picks, the Raiders are the ones that would want a higher pick because they need a quarterback.
They need a lot more than a quarterback.
But the Jaguars don't need a quarterback.
So Aiden O'Connell, I guess, is in line for the start again this week. I like the Raiders, actually. Just from one of the reasons is because so much of the money's on the Jaguars, and the Jaguars suck. Jaguars are going on the road to Las Vegas. You have to still be wary of teams traveling to Las Vegas because they get to Las Vegas and want to have fun. But I think the Raiders can play a hard-hitting, tough enough game and I don't believe they're necessarily tanking. I don't think their coach has that mindset.
He's probably coaching for his job, right?
Yeah, exactly. So he's not going to want to lose because he's going to want to try to find another job. But I like the Raiders.
I do like the Raiders. I wouldn't recommend wasting your money here.
Well, it's two bad teams, right? And
Yeah.
usually you say take the points. But I think here with the fact that all the money and the bets seem to be on the Jags, something's iffy here. Like maybe it's whack. Maybe they are on the take and everybody knows. But I like the Raiders.
All right.
I wouldn't like. I'm not going to look. I'm not eager to bet this game.
All right, next game, and this is the Sunday night game. Tampa Bay Bucks at the Dallas Cowboys. This is at Bucks -3.5. I mean, Bucks really have been playing well all season. There was that one game early against the Broncos. It was just kind of like, how did that even happen kind of games. Even when they were without Evans, they were competitive in a lot of games. Cooper Rush has continued his streak as this backup that wins games. He's won 3 out of the last 4. His only loss in those games was the Bengals, which was a close game and kind of turned on a play towards the end there. The Cowboys defense has been playing well, but the Bucks do have a good run defense. And I think if the Cowboys are not going to be able to run the ball, and they have to put it all on Cooper Rush's shoulders in the passing game. That might be a difficult path for them. I see no reason to change from taking the Bucks, who have been playing well, dominated the Chargers last week. So I'm going with the Bucks.
Bucks, Eagles, Commanders. That's the Giants' last 3 games. 2 of them are at home. They go on the road to Philly in the middle. They're going to lose out. Buccaneers here strong. Probably my best play of the day. The Buccaneers with Mike Evans gives them. I mean, that's really the missing piece, right? They struggled majorly when they didn't have Godwin and Evans. They got Evans back, and they started looking like a formidable offense again. So I'm going to stick with Baker's playing the best football of his life.
Yeah,
and Dallas sucks.
I think he's a rookie, but like Jalen McMillan or something. I don't know what his first name is.
Yeah,
I think he's a rookie. He's stepped up. He had a couple at least 1-2 touchdown game 2 games ago. So, I mean, he's kind of stepping into a number 2 role. So, yeah, I see no reason to doubt the Bucks here. All right, and then the final game is the Monday night game. This is Saints at the Packers. And I literally, when I first looked at this line, I didn't have my glasses on, and I thought it said 14.5, but I was like, that can't be. Like, I don't understand how the Packers, and I think they're very good, are 14.5-point favorites over a Saints team that actually was competitive last week. I mean, they almost won that game. They went for 2 at the end for the win. If they had it, they could have tied it up and taken it to overtime. The Saints are going to be without Derek Carr again. It is going to be Spencer Rattler who comes back in to start this one. Alvin Kamara has been ruled out of this game. But 14.5 points is so many points. And 80% of the money is on the Packers in this game. So I'm not saying I want to take the Saints, but I can't take the Packers at 14.5.
I can. It's going to be cold. The Saints are coming out of a dome. They're going way up north. They got Spencer Rattler as their quarterback. And as you mentioned, probably their most dynamic weapon, Alvin Kamara, is not playing.
Wide receivers.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's been an epiphany here in the Saints. Not that he's racking up a ton of catches and yards, but he's scoring the ball.
Yeah.
And he's questionable coming into this game as well.
Okay.
Yes, is that what you were about to say? Because I am going.
Well, no, I was going to say he had his
Packers
things with Carr for a few games there. But
and Carr's out. He's done for the year, right? So, the backup, Spencer Rattler's got a little bit of speed. He can move around, but I think you'll probably see Jake Haener in this game, the rookie, at some point. And I think the Packers are going to roll.
Haener started last week and got benched for Rattler.
Yeah, well, could switch it up this week if they're struggling at halftime.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe if it got below 14, I would consider taking the Packers. It just does. The line it seems too high. I don't know.
I think you got to look at the Packers. They're going to demolish the bad teams. And the Packers are in like that tight division race, right? Nobody's talking about them. They're really looking at like Minnesota as a possibility to get over Detroit if Detroit stumbles here with all the injuries that they've come upon. 3 games left.
Well,
Packers are only 2 games back. If they could put a string of 3 together and something happens with both of these teams, Detroit and Minnesota, where they drop off the face of the cliff the last couple of games, it could be the Green Bay Packers taking the division. But as far-fetched as that might seem, because they're going to have to jump Minnesota to get to Detroit, and Detroit is just looking unworldly, I think that the Packers are going to come in and concentrate and really put their best playoff foot forward to try to go into the playoffs on a hot streak.
Well, that would make me question that, because do the Packers have to play the Lions again? And if so, what week? Is that like next week? I don't know, but could they be looking ahead?
The Packers are not playing the Lions. They've already lost to the Lions twice.
Okay.
So
Do they
they're
play the
finishing
Vikings?
with the Saints, Vikings, Bears.
Okay.
All right.
So
Saints, Vikings, Bears, they control their own destiny against the Vikings. They could get one there. I don't see that they're going to lose. Well, the Bears could be a tough game. That's a really big rivalry, right? So I'm not going to necessarily put that in the win-lock column. But Minnesota, right, they're playing Seattle. They're in Seattle. They could lose that game. Then they got Green Bay. Then they got the Lions. So they got a tough look too. So the Lions are playing. If Green Bay could win out, that means they would beat Minnesota. Right? You hope Minnesota then loses to the Lions.
well, I don't think the Packers can't jump the Lions.
No,
they
I
lost
don't know. We
both.
have to look at the tiebreaker. Yeah. They lost both, so they wouldn't be able to. The Lions would have to lose all three. So it could be Minnesota loses to Seattle. Right? They lose to Green Bay. They beat Detroit. Detroit loses to Minnesota.
Okay.
Right? Let's see who
But
else
then they all
Detroit
finish
has. Detroit has the Bears, right? Which it's possible with all the injuries, but probably not. They have to go to San Fran on a night game, and then Minnesota. So this could shake out, but they would have to lose, I guess.
Well, Minnesota's
three.
really-
They would have to lose to the Bears. Detroit would have to lose to the Bears for the Packers to win the division. But let's keep in mind, it's not division or bust. 'Cause
Well, I
these
guess
three
my
teams are
only
gonna be
point
in the
was,
playoffs
would the
regardless
Packers
of-
be looking ahead? This is a Monday night game. They've got 2 division games coming up.
I don't think you can look at I get it in the middle of the season, but not now when we're looking when they're 2 games back. There's no look ahead games when they're 2 games back
Well,
and they're trying to
the
fight to
difference
get the
between
division.
winning and winning by 14.5 points.
Well, that's what we're talking about too.
Right.
That's a great point.
Thank you. That's a first, man.
It's not
Are
a
you in the
first.
Christmas spirit?
Hey, bah humbug. I give you compliments all the time on here. We should go
I
back
don't
to the
think
tape.
so.
I always tell you that.
I
That's a
should
good
throw the
point.
challenge flag on that one. We're gonna have to go back and
I tell you, I'm proud of you. I probably told you I'm proud of you twice in this podcast
I'm
with some
not-
of the comments that you've made.
I don't know. Okay. All right. Anyway. All right. So that's
The way you're thinking about the games. I get proud when I hear you and when you start talking about the way you're thinking about a game. And it shows to me sometimes that you're understanding it. It's not just X's and O's. Sometimes it's feel. Sometimes it's flow, ebb and flow of the season, right? So you're starting to see some of those intangibles that come together when you're trying to decide who's going to win a game.
okay.
Anyway,
All right.
proud of you.
So you are on the Packers there.
No, I'm on the Saints. No, I'm on the Packers. I'm just kidding. So
All
smoke
right.
'em.
So that'll do it for us for week 16. So this is
Christmas is coming up.
Yeah. So we won't see you again before Christmas. So we'll wish you a Merry Christmas. But we will be back next week. If you're watching, like, subscribe, and remember, we are recording early. So if I get any significant changes, I will post it in the comments on YouTube.
Comments on YouTube or look at the Facebook page if you're friends with the Married with Picks Facebook page.
No, I'll do it on the YouTube because there'll be a video that I can actually comment on. All right. Peace out.
Wildcat football. Football.